Okay, hi everyone. Are we ready to get started? Happy 2022. We finally made it to a new year. Yay. I have a word of the year that I'm sticking to. I don't know if you've adopted a word of the year yet, but my word is endurance. So we are I don't know what part of the marathon we're in, but we're in a marathon, and so we're just going to keep on with our endurance. But I think that also means taking a break and hydrating, refueling. So I hope that you are taking care of yourself and staying well. I know this latest COVID spike it's exhausting all of us. We've pushed our classes back a week in hopes that the spike will subside a bit. And so we will have another wonderful semester. I am Sarah Pappert, and I am the CEO of Literacy Achieves. I'm going to go over this agenda real quickly. We have a wonderful workshop planned today. I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Miriam Ortiz to give our keynote speech. She's also going to lead a breakout session a little later. But we first met a little over 2 years ago, before the pandemic was even on our minds, and she was teaching a graduate course at SMU on research and evaluation. And so in the spring of 2020, she had 6 doctoral students in her class, and they did a qualitative and quantitative assessment of our programs at Literacy Achieves. So Dr. Ortiz and her students really got to know us intimately and understand the work that we're doing. And so I'm thrilled that she can be with us today to share some of her expertise and insight with us. And then we're going to have a couple breakout sessions by level. Hopefully you know which level you're supposed to be in, but if you're unclear, I know our staff can help you with that. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll have breakout sessions by topic, and so you can choose the breakout session that you are interested in participating in. Okay, so I'm hoping that everybody has access to the chat feature on your, Ashley, can you confirm that everybody can put something in the chat if they like?
Yes, they should be able to.
Okay, so I'm gonna have a few trivia questions for you all. I'm gonna talk for a few minutes, but I'm gonna sprinkle in some trivia questions. And my first trivia question is, it's 2022, and use the chat, and the first person to get the correct answer in the chat will win. We'll have a few prizes for our winners, but the first question is, it's 2022, and how old is Literacy Achieves this year? We're celebrating a milestone birthday. It's not 10. It's not 20. 25, Nancy Singer. All right, Nancy Singer. So this is the 25th anniversary year of Literacy Achieves, and we are planning some special activities as the year goes along, so stay on the lookout for those. On the next slide, this is just a reminder of our mission and vision statement, and you know, the work that we're doing is so important. I don't know if you realize, but about 42% of Dallas residents speak a language other than English as their primary language in their home. And so to be able to have a resource in the community to help people learning English, to promote well-being of students, families, and the broader community, it's really important, and it's making such a huge difference for so many people. And as we think about the community, I have my next trivia question. So this is number 2. Trivia question number 2 is, and it's a little bit tricky, so I'm trying to trick you, but how many campuses does Literacy Achieves have? Oh, 4, Bonnie, you get it. I told y'all I was being a little tricky. So our 3 campuses in person, which is West, Elm, and Vickery Meadow. And we now have a 4th campus, which is our virtual campus, which Bonnie, I'm excited you teach at our virtual campus from, I think you're in Florida. I think, I know you're on the East Coast, so that's really cool. So we've expanded our sense of community to being in person in Dallas and virtual online. Okay, on our next slide, this is our staff, and we have one new team member that joined us this past fall. Pam Fields is our adult program assistant. So she is with us part-time, and you will see her at the campuses helping out. But the most important thing to know is who is your adult program manager. So if you're at Vickery Meadow, it's LaTanya. If you're at Elm, it's Jody. And if you're at the virtual campus or West Dallas, it's Laura. And so these are the people that you report to. If you have any questions, there is no small or silly question, but reach out to them. And I just want to say, and you guys, those of you who've been teaching with us for a while, you already know this, but these women are amazing. They are incredible. And, you know, back to the endurance word, all of them have demonstrated endurance, grace, perseverance, and I can't tell you how thankful I am to each of them for leading us through the last 2 years and making everything possible. I also want to recognize Ashley, who's our Outcomes and Evaluations Director. So she is really overseeing all of the adult program activities. Letty, who is our Student Services Manager. Anytime a student has a social service need outside of the classroom, Letty is able to work with them, provide case management, referrals. She works with lots of community partners to help with any kind of issue, whether it's financial, health, legal, all kinds of resources. And then I also want to recognize, and I'm going to ask her, well, actually, before I turn it over to her, I'm going to ask a trivia question. And that is, so y'all ready with your chat? My next trivia question is, what is, and this is another kind of tricky one, so be ready for this. What is the weekly time commitment for volunteering at Literacy Achieves? I see a lot of 2s, but I'm being tricky with you. Karen Weiss, 2 hours plus planning. You get it. Karen got it. So plus planning. Planning is so important. You can't forget your planning. So we would say 2.5 to 3 hours a week to allow time for planning. And speaking of volunteers, Latrice, can you give us a quick update on where we are with volunteer recruitment and any new initiatives?
Yes, I can. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited that you're here. I was looking for the names of those who have been through a new volunteer orientation within the last few weeks. I'm like, oh, they totally know these. So I'm excited everyone is here. Right now, we have about 24 openings still available that we need to get filled before the 31st. At Vickery Meadow, we have 12 opportunities available. West Dallas, it's 5. At Elm, there are 4. And online, we have 3. So there's about 6 people who are waiting who just did a new volunteer orientation yesterday. And so they're going to be placed. So that should drop to about 18 spaces. But if you know anyone, a friend, family member, coworker, colleague, please share my information, and I can schedule a new volunteer orientation with them so that we can go ahead and get them ready to go. So about 18 is what we're going to have available, and we have opportunities open at each of the campuses. Most of them are daytime opportunities, 9, 10, 11, 12, or during the morning and afternoons. There's only 4 opportunities available for the evenings. Those usually really go fast. So the morning and afternoon, so the 9 a.m. time slots and then the 12:30 time slots are what we have the most opportunities for.
And Latrice,
Yes.
I also understand we've got some interns that are going to support us this year. So you want to tell everyone a little bit about that?
I do. It's so exciting. We have 2 interns so far. There's a couple of them that are still gathering information from their professors, but we have 2 interns from UNT Dallas who will be joining us, and they each need about 150 hours to complete practicums. And so they're going into teaching and focusing on the family, which our organization is perfect for them because we have a children's program and an adult program, although they'll be focusing on adults this semester. So it's really exciting to see them hand out. The universities have made it so easy for us to make opportunities available. They're using a platform called Handshake, and you post everything there. It's like their own job board. So it's a wonderful opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you, Latrice. And so again, if you guys have any leads on people who might be interested in teaching, either as an intern or a volunteer, you can email Latrice and you can contact her at that email address, volunteer@literacyachieves.org. Okay, I've got a trivia question for you, so get ready to type again. Now, this one you're probably just going to have to guess because I don't know how you would know it, but the question is, how many volunteers taught last fall at Literacy Achieves? 260. Oh, y'all are going fast. It's less than 212. It's higher than 100. Oh, 170. Oh, you are at 197. Okay, Guadalupe, you're the closest. You're the closest so far. So Guadalupe, I'm gonna award you the prize. And the actual number is, and if you advance to the next slide, we'll have some more data points. We had 170 volunteers, so it's down in the bottom right corner. So we had 170 volunteer teachers. Thank you, all of you who were with us last fall. And a few more program statistics. We had 418 students enrolled. These are adult students. 173 were in person. We had 19 at our internet cafe at West Dallas, and then 226 that were fully virtual. 82% of our students attended 12 or more hours, 91% if they were in person, and 76% if they were virtual. We also asked students about confidence and technology, and so lots of improvement there. And then the other thing that we do is we use that assessment to place the students at the beginning of the school year, but we give it to them again at the end of each semester to measure what kind of progress they have made. And so 60% of the students just in the one semester, and really we're looking for improvement over the whole year, but just after one semester, 60% had already improved by one or more level. One thing that I think is interesting is that our in-person student numbers are not as high as our virtual. And that is largely driven by capacity. We have to keep our in-person classrooms very limited on the number of people. And you can see in the picture there, we've got everybody spread out. There's actually tape on the floor so that people keep their desks in their little pods. So we have lots of social distancing. People are wearing their masks. I think when you look at this data, and I think we know from all of the research that's out there that the best environment for learning is an in-person environment. I know that that's not possible for everybody, but to the extent that we're able to, we really we want to be able to offer as much in-person learning as possible. So again, thank you to everybody who's been sticking it out, both in person and virtual. It's really making a tremendous difference. Okay, and so before we go to the next slide, because the answer to my next question will be on the next slide, is I want to share some information about our children's program. As many of you know, our adult students are here, they are enrolled, and their number one goal is to learn English so that they can help their children. And so we have an early childhood program. And so my question is, how many children were enrolled last fall at Literacy Achieves? Oh, y'all are too high, come down. A little lower. Oh, Diane, you're really close. Diane Hart, you're going to get the prize this time. So we had, and go ahead and look at the next slide. So we had 100 children enrolled in our programs last fall. And also with the children's program, we reduced our capacity to 50%. So that meant we enrolled half as fewer children as we normally would, just to ensure that we could keep the classroom as safe as possible. As you know, children 5 and under are not eligible for a vaccine. The kids were fantastic about wearing their masks and just being very respectful of all of the protocols and appreciating that they could come to school. So we have infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, and our children also did a great job with attendance. 76% of the children attended 24 or more hours. I will also mention that we had no virtual programming for children. All of the children's programming was in person. It just trying to put little kids on a Zoom screen, it doesn't work. So we have everything in person for the children. We also have an assessment for our children. It's called the CORE, or Child Observation Record, and it assesses 7 different areas of development. And in the fall, we always focus on language literacy and communication and English language learning. And so you can see the kids made great progress in both of those categories on the CORE. And so I've got one last trivia question and one last update that I'm going to share with you guys. And for those of you who have been here for a number of years, you know that the spring time means we have our annual spring fundraiser. It's called Wings of Spring, and it's something that we really look forward to each year. And at this event, we present an award that is named in honor of one of our longtime volunteers. And so my final trivia question is, who is the volunteer? Oh, Janie, you got it. Marnie Wildenthal. Janie Outs, you're the winner of my last trivia contest. And so that takes me to our last slide. And just a quick plug for our Wings of Spring event. I know many of you support this and attend, and it really is, it's one of our main sources of support for Literacy Achieves. All of our fundraising is through private sources. We rely entirely on charitable donations and contributions to make everything happen. And so if you are inclined and able to support the event, it's going to be on Tuesday, April 26th. It's going to be outdoors at the Annette Strauss Square in the Downtown Arts District. We are excited this year to present the Marnie Wildenthal Literacy Legacy Award to Rabbi Nancy Kasten. Nancy's been a longtime friend of Literacy Achieves and does lots of great work out in the community. I'm sure that many of you know Nancy and the great work that she's involved with. Right now, her main focus is working at a group called Faith Commons. And that group is really focused on bringing people with diverse faith backgrounds together. And I think there's a lot of synergy with Literacy Achieves, where we bring together people with diverse language and cultural backgrounds. And in that space, we are able to learn from each other. I'm also very thankful to our event chair, Jabeen Zaidi. Some of you guys know Jabeen. She's been a longtime volunteer teacher, and her fiance, Stephen Hurley, are co-chairs. Our honorary chairs are Alina and Ruben Esquivel, and they immigrated to the US from Cuba many years ago and have been just at the forefront of providing leadership and encouragement to the immigrant community in Dallas and on a broader perspective. So we're really excited to have them be part of this year's event. And so speaking of learning from each other, I am going to turn it over to Ashley to share just any additional program updates and to officially welcome and introduce Dr. Ortiz. So thank you all. I'm looking forward to a fantastic semester.
Okay, I just want to thank you so much for being here, and wanted to give you just a real quick update on enrollment information for the spring. So currently we have just over 300 students who are returning from the fall, and that's if they took their post test, and I'm sure we'll have some stragglers that come in. We usually do. And Pam, who is our new adult program assistant, is fast and furiously processing over 150 new registrations that have come in. And about 115 of those students have taken their placement test. We're offering that online just to kind of mitigate any exposure to this new variant. And the online test seems to be doing pretty well. And obviously we kind of had to put a pause on the registration because we've had so many applications that have come in advance of the spring. So know that you are more important than ever, given that the demand has not gone down at all. In fact, it's just only going up. And we are making one-on-one appointments for those students who can't take the test online, but we are finding that our students are very, very tech savvy. So anyway, that is a little update on our enrollment. And I also want to take this opportunity to introduce to you Dr. Miriam Ortiz, who is our keynote speaker. And I was first introduced to her in October of 2019. And I'll just let you pause for a minute and remember what we now lovingly refer to as the good old days. So that was pre-COVID. And Dr. Ortiz and two teams of her students from SMU's Simmons School of Education and Human Development worked with us on some quantitative and qualitative research. And her students looked at historical program data and looked at the correlation between student persistence and overall improvement, which, as you know, is a true gift because this kind of analysis can be super expensive and super time consuming for smaller nonprofits. They also did some focus groups with our students to look at how Literacy Achieves programs influence participant home life and community involvement. So needless to say, having PhD students analyze and evaluate our program's effectiveness was a huge benefit, and the results of which have helped us adjust our programming even during the throes of a pandemic. So I am super thankful for Dr. Ortiz, but currently she is Executive Director of the Division for Learning Disabilities of the Council for Exceptional Children and is the owner and lead consultant for K-12 Matters. And right now she is living in Florida. She's an expert in the fields of early literacy, behavior management, and intervention assessment, program evaluation, and special education. She might love data and outcomes more than I do, which is kind of an understatement. And so we are really thankful to have her with us today. She will also be leading a breakout session later this afternoon that will be recorded if you are unable to attend it live. So please help me welcome Dr. Miriam Ortiz.
Hello. How is everyone doing today? Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. Hopefully my internet is not too spotty, so if you guys can hear me okay, wonderful. So I do have some slides that I would like to share. So is it okay if I share my screen? Yes, okay. Oh yes, I see I have access. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So I'm really honored to be here today. I'm so thankful. I really admire everything that Literacy Achieves does and how you support the community and your students and families that have so much need. And so today, the title of my presentation is Awareness, Knowledge, and Skills, how a teacher's cultural competence and sensitivity really does impact student outcomes. And so some information might be things that you already know, and some information might be new to you, but I really wanted to make sure that we brought the research, what we know in the research, and bring it forth to you. So, vamos a empezar con una discusión en español. Quiero saber y quiero dejarles saber lo que vamos a hablar hoy es de la competencia cultural. ¿Y qué son los beneficios académicos? Porque es algo que es bien integrar en nuestros salones. So I'm going to pause right there and give everyone a chance to kind of process and reflect. So when I switched from English to Spanish, which was probably unexpected, what was your first thought? And how did that make you feel? And please feel free to, put in the chat, to let me know. I am taking a look and monitoring the chat. So how did that make you feel? What were you thinking when I switched to Spanish? So I see someone said they wish they knew Spanish, confused. Really listening for familiar words, just waiting for me to interpret. Some, assumed the training would be in Spanish. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I think that it's really important for us to think about and reflect, right? Thinking about when we have new students that are coming into our classroom that are not familiar, with English, they come with all these different languages, how they feel when they come into the classroom and we start our instruction. And a lot of times we make assumptions, or we just go like really quickly, and it's very intimidating and very confusing. Here we go. So really, to start out in our presentation, I would like to start out with a few definitions. So the first one that I want to talk about is implicit bias. And so what an implicit bias is, it's really an unconscious attitude or a stereotype. It's something that we don't really realize we have at all times. It's like a prejudgment usually that we have based on what our experiences have been in different situations and with different individuals. Then the next term I would like to define is cultural competence. So cultural competence is the ability to effectively interact and develop meaningful relationships with individuals from diverse backgrounds. And so what I really want to point out about this term cultural competence is that it's not just tolerance. So when we're talking about tolerance, we're really talking and thinking about really just overlooking differences, regardless of our point of view. But cultural competence takes it a step further, and it really recognizes the diversity between individuals and different cultures, and it's really purposeful and being able to interact and develop those relationships even though there are those differences. And then finally, which is the term that I want to define that we're really going to hone in on today, is culturally responsive teaching. And culturally responsive teaching really is a research-based approach, and it really connects the cultures, languages, and life experiences with what students are learning. So it really looks at the whole student, right? The whole individual. So let's start out by talking a little bit about biases, right? This is a hot topic. This is something that, you know, we hear about a lot, and sometimes it's really an uncomfortable thing to think about or to talk about. But we really do have biases based on our experiences and situations that we've been in throughout our lives. And so oftentimes what the research has shown us is that biases usually come in the form of, right, assumptions that we make. So a lot of times in classrooms, it's possible, and again, these are not true to every single person, so we don't want to generalize like that, but we do want to think about and really understand that these biases they do exist. So some instructors may believe that students really do know how to seek help when they're struggling, and they know how to ask for help, or they feel comfortable advocating for themselves. So because that's something that we really encourage in our culture here in the United States, right? You know, we encourage our students to ask questions, and we encourage them to seek help. But that might not necessarily be true in other cultures. So that's a bias that we come into the classroom with, really assuming and thinking that our students who really need the help are going to seek that support, when in fact the opposite is true. Students who are really at higher risk for struggling academically often really are less likely to seek help and support. So we really have to be vigilant for that. Another assumption that we may make as instructors and teachers is that possibly students from certain backgrounds or social groups may have different intellectual abilities, or their backgrounds may be associated with different achievement levels. Another assumption that we see often in the classroom is that instructors might expect students who speak with a strong accent, that they may necessarily be poor writers, or students that have substandard writing abilities, maybe they lack intellectual ability. So those are all biases that really come out in classrooms oftentimes. So what do we know from the research about our biases? Well, there really is a clear link between teacher bias and student outcomes. Over and over and over, the research has actually really supported that claim that a teacher's own biases actually does impact the student outcomes in the classroom. It impacts a student's perception of themselves. It impacts the student's perception towards school, and it also impacts their performance, their academic performance in school. What we also have seen, and you can see several research articles that support this statement, is that teachers, when they make racially biased decisions, it really does shape the lives of their students. It really does have an impact on the student's future. And then this one I thought was particularly interesting, which is that the stronger your implicit biases, the larger the disparities between test scores. So there was this study in Educational Researcher published in 2020 took a look at different counties in the United States, and they surveyed teachers, and they took a look at their biases towards different cultures, and then they compared that to student test scores in that area. And schools and teachers who had larger biases, the test scores were more disproportionate. So very interesting. So let's go back to our definitions of cultural competence and culturally responsive teaching. So we can go back and let's hone back in, right? So remember that cultural competence is that ability to really interact and develop relationships, and that culturally responsive teaching really is intentional, and it uses all the different aspects of the individual and it plugs it into the classroom for learning. So what is it? So let's dive a little deeper into this. So culturally responsive teaching is actually intended to be very intentional. It's not just a part of your personality and being culturally sensitive to other students or being aware of cultural differences, but culturally responsive teaching is actually very intentional. During your planning and when you're thinking about activities or when you're choosing ways to supplement the curriculum in your classroom, you're really intentional about what you choose and what you discuss and how you frame those discussions and how you present that material. Culturally responsive teaching is also very inclusive. Right, so we're not thinking about just one culture or one type of diversity, but we're really thinking about the various different individuals in our classroom that we have and everything that makes that person an individual, right? It's also respectful. So making sure that we're not putting our own implicit and explicit biases into what we're bringing into the classroom and how we're presenting that instruction. And then fourth, it's cooperative, right? So it uses the assets of the students, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what does it look like? So a little bit more, let's dive even deeper into this. So what would it look like to have a classroom that is culturally responsive, or a teacher that is using culturally responsive teaching? So what we want to do is we really want to give students frequent opportunities to share about themselves, their lives, their cultures, their norms. We want to make sure that we also are mindful of communication styles, of different patterns or norms in the culture. So we'll get into specifics about that in a few minutes. And then another one that it's a little tricky and sometimes it is a little uncomfortable is just the simple, part of learning how to actually say students' names correctly. And it's okay. It's okay to ask them to repeat it. It's okay to, practice, saying their names, but just the simple task of really learning how to say a student's name correctly really does go a long way. And then finally, one that we probably don't talk a lot about, but it's really critical, is really thinking about and considering a student's funds of knowledge. So funds of knowledge, what that term means, it's the historically accumulated bodies of knowledge that a person possesses, that an individual possesses. And those are skills that are essential for that person, that individual, to function in their community. So those funds of knowledge, what my funds of knowledge are going to look look different from your funds of knowledge, right? Because my experiences, my culture, my community is most likely different from yours. You know, even geographically, right? Right now, I am living in Florida. My funds of knowledge for what things that I know and I think about and I need to process every day for what I'm going through, that's going to look different than what it's going to look like in Texas or wherever else you're joining us from today. So really understanding that my truths might not necessarily be your truths, but that's because we're living in different places and with different experiences, and we have those different essential skills to flourish and thrive in our communities. So why does this matter? Right? Why should we really care? Why does it matter that we really are culturally responsive and that we think about these things in our classrooms? Well, because culturally responsive teaching really focuses on an individual's assets or strengths. So what we've seen in the past is that a typical model of teaching that doesn't incorporate culturally responsive teachings often looks at a student and thinks, well, because they're from here, or because they don't speak English, or, you know, because they live here, you know, they're not going to be able to X, Y, Z. And so we automatically put a deficit. And so what culturally responsive teaching does is it takes a look at the strengths of the individual, and it really captures that and incorporates that in the lessons and in the teaching. So that also helps teachers better meet students' needs. So I'm in education, and so I'm not sure how many in the audience are educators or have been teachers in the past, but we see a lot of overrepresentation of minority students in special education programs. And a lot of times it's because there's assumptions made that because either they don't speak the language or they don't have these certain skills, that they are unable to be a part of the general curriculum and they need special education services. But when we look at, instead of that deficit, we really hone in and focus on student strengths, then we can actually raise expectations for students and better meet their needs, and really think, what are the scaffolds or supports that I need to put in place to help this student meet that expectation? Culturally responsive teaching also builds a safe academic environment for our students, and that really allows them to take more academic risks. A prime example is with the way that we give feedback to our students, the way when we correct their errors. So one process that I really like to use is the I, we, you model. And there's a lot of evidence behind that model for younger children and for older children. And I understand that you guys work with adults, and it really works with adults as well. So what happens is, if a student makes an error in a way that they're reading something or saying something, rather than saying, oh, that's wrong, you know, no, that's not how we say it, rather than correcting them in that manner, we say, oh, that word is want. Here, say it with me, want. Okay, now try it, you say it, and have the student do it. And that way we're modeling what that appropriate or correct skill or behavior or word is. We're giving them a supported chance to do it together and practice it together. And then we're giving them an opportunity to be successful on their own. So even just the fact of not telling a student, no, you're wrong, and modeling it, correcting that error. So we're not letting them continue to make that error, but we're making that correction in a positive, supporting environment. It really makes the students feel more able and capable and supported, and they're going to be more willing to participate and be engaged in what you're doing. And it also helps the student feel valued and empowered, because you're valuing their culture, you're valuing their feelings, and you're valuing their individuality. So I mean, I love research. I love, just as Ashley was saying, I love research, and I really want to bring to you, what we know in the research so that we can put it into practice. That's what I'm extremely passionate about. So even those researchers and scientists that take a look at how people learn, so that they do research on the brain and how we learn, they show us and tell us and provide evidence that learners process new information best when it's linked to something they already know or are familiar with. So that is key. When you are bringing in new information into the classroom, it's so important to really connect it to what they already know, to their previous experiences, because it's probably going to be a lot different than our previous experiences. And so being able for them to link that new information that they're learning to something that they're familiar with, it really makes those neurons in your brains light up, and it builds those connections that really help with comprehension. We also know that when we have a culturally responsive classroom, it improves academic achievement. It usually improves attendance and generates more engagement. So it's over and over in the research, we have support for those things. We also know that culturally responsive teaching promotes academic achievement and engagement. Here's another set of research articles that say that. And it promotes a sense of critical consciousness. So what that means, it allows the student to be more willing to advocate for themselves and advocate for their rights in the different environments, and advocate and fight against inequalities. So that was a lot of information, right? A lot of, okay, this is the why, this is what it is, but what can we do about it? What are things that we can implement tomorrow or next week in our classrooms to help us be culturally responsive teachers, to really implement that in our classes? So I want to present to you some 8 competencies for culturally responsive teaching. So, and this is a graphic that I found from a research article that was published in a New America journal. And so we're going to go through each one of them. So number 1 is the first step in really becoming a culturally responsive teacher is reflecting on your own biases, really taking a step back and thinking about what life experiences have I had that influence my beliefs and my actions and the way that I teach. And do I have any overgeneralized beliefs about certain groups? So that's really the first step, just taking a step back and just a self-reflection. Step 2 is taking a look and recognizing those biases, not just in ourselves, but in the systems, and really learning how to become more comfortable in advocating for the disruption of those practices and those norms. Then we want to really draw on students' cultures to enhance and supplement our curriculum. So I know that you have a specific curriculum that you have in the classroom that you use to teach, But sometimes we bring in additional things to supplement that curriculum, right? To help with different activities that we're going to do in the class. And so if you're going to do that, then you want to make sure that you use examples that are going to be meaningful to the different cultures and individuals and ethnicities in your classroom. It's also really important to bring real world issues into the classroom. We know in the research and educational research that if a student really understands the so what of the instruction, they're more likely to be engaged and grasp and retain the information that we're presenting it to them. So we want to really bring something that's relevant to the students into the classroom. And it also, those rigorous and relevant projects do allow learners to build their sense of civic responsibility and learn how to be agents of change themselves. So we also want to model high expectations for all students. So remembering that we want to let go of that deficit model of thinking about what the students won't be able to do and really focusing in on their strengths and leveraging those strengths in the classroom, setting them up for success. And then making sure that when we're thinking about that, we think about the appropriate supports and scaffolds that they're going to need. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in the breakout session about specific practices and strategies that you can implement as supports and scaffolds. So number 6 is to really promote that respect for the differences, right? So the way that you model that respect for different cultures and different ethnicities and different individuals in your own classroom, the students are going to grasp onto that and they're going to present that in different ways as well. So if you model it and you set that expectation, they're going to rise to the occasion. And a few things that we want to think about are cultural norms, right? The way that we ask questions and expect students to answer questions. Thinking about how different cultures think about eye contact, right? So that's something that's subtle.
And video.
Oh. Everything okay? So thinking about eye contact and how different cultures, how our culture views eye contact as a sign of respect, but there are other cultures who actually believe that if you give eye contact to an adult, or to a person in authority, that's actually disrespectful. So being sensitive to those different backgrounds that people are coming in with. Also, some cultures really emphasize, and they're big on physical contact, which I know, especially now during these times with COVID, it's a very sensitive issue. But I can tell you that, in my family, we're Puerto Rican, we're Hispanic, it's always hugging and kissing, and you talk to someone and you have your hand on their shoulder, and that's very normal. That's part of the culture. So just being aware of that and understanding how different cultures interact and what's a norm. And then a big one, which I see a lot, even in my own household, is questioning versus giving directives, right? So thinking about student differences in that way. So one example that I like to give is, so my husband grew up in a household where when you would like someone to do something, instead of giving an explicit directive, he will ask it, in a question, in the form of a question. Like he'll ask me, honey, would you like to turn down the AC? Well, he's asking me a question. So I always grew up in a household where you give directives. So when he asks me, I would say, oh, no, I don't want to. you know, where now, you know, we've been together for 11 years now. Now I understand that when he's asking me that, he's actually wanting to say, will you please turn down the AC? And we've had to really think about how we communicate in those different forms, right? With the questioning versus the giving a directive, and how different cultures and students of different backgrounds really do have those differences, and really navigating and understanding what other cultures and people are used to. So number 7 is collaborating with families and the community, and really seeking to learn more about the local community and the cultures and the values and expectations for education in that community. And really developing the trust of families of color and low-income families to really ensure that they're involved in the education. And then finally, you know, really thinking about the way we communicate, and communicating in linguistically and culturally responsive ways. A lot of times, again, going back to like the questioning and the directives, you know, miscommunication can occur, you know, because of those different types of communication styles, right? And so we want to just be cognizant of that, and be cognizant about the way that we communicate, and not making assumptions that people understand what we mean when we say things. And so, here we go. So to implement that communicating in a culturally responsive way, so really thinking about how students communicate in both verbal and nonverbal ways, and also really taking into account a student's natural way of talking in the classroom, and honoring and accommodating those multilingual students, and really advocating for the different services and the different languages. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the breakout session. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you today and really present these things to you today. I am so honored. And Sarah and Ashley, I'm open to answering a few questions if we have time.
Definitely. I think we would love to have open up for questions either through the chat, or if a volunteer wants to unmute themselves and directly ask a question, that would be great too.
Oh, that's a great question. So the question in the chat is how to handle it if someone is disrespectful to another in class. So I am a really strong advocate for preventative classroom management. So I actually, part of my background when I was teaching in the classroom was working actually with students who have behavior disorders. So we were really big on really preventative classroom management. So really the first thing is operationalizing in the classroom your definition of what does respect mean, what does it look like. So when we tell people that a rule in our classroom is be respectful, that's really abstract. We really need to operationalize that first and say, okay, what does respect look like? What does it look like? Does it mean, you know, and we can operationalize it by saying, okay, maybe that's when someone else is talking, we wait until they're finished so then we talk. We can say, you know, being respectful is not laughing at someone else when they answer a question. So really just being specific about our operational definition of respect, I would say, is the first step. And then really having a plan in place in advance that
Looks like she might be having a little bit of technical difficulty. So we'll wait just a couple seconds and see if she comes back.
Ashley, how do you come back when you're frozen?
Sometimes you have to log out and then log back in, or just wait for your, Laura says that you pray. I like her answer better. Sometimes you just have to wait. Looks like she's going to try and log back in.
Increases and I hear a lot of clicks, I know that I'm done for. So
Right. Oh, thanks. Yeah, sorry, I got kicked out for a second there. Okay, so do we have another question? Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
hear you.
okay, great. Sorry about that.
We didn't have a chance, though, to listen to the complete answer to the question because you froze. So if you wouldn't mind just going back over that for us, I'd appreciate it. Oh dear.
Sure, not a problem. So the first step was really operationalizing that definition of what it means to be respectful. So being very specific and explicit with this is what respect looks like in the classroom. And so whether that's, not talking at the same time that another person is talking or not laughing when they respond to a question. And then the second part of that is really collectively as a group deciding what are the logical consequences in the classroom that you all agree upon for someone who doesn't meet those expectations. So that might be a question for someone else. What can be expected in the classrooms? I can speak more to elementary, middle, and high school.
Do you have any other questions? Okay. Yes, Linda says that very rarely is there an issue of disrespect. Yes. Thankfully. Okay. If there's no other questions, then we will move on and say thank you to Dr. Ortiz, and we will see her during our second set of breakout sessions. We'll start with our first. We'll take just a quick break. We're going to take a 10-minute break.